Well, I would like for our kids to at least hear our perspective, because I think all of us at some point face crossroads in life. Some are more eventful and effective than others. But one of the first ones was what we've mentioned earlier of her aunt making a suggestion to us of going to McCall. Had it not been for Grace thinking and perceiving that that would be a good possibility, our life could have taken a whole different direction. We'd have gone to work in the cannery that summer, and who knows what would have happened at the end of the summer. But as a result, we got connected to a introductory to pastoring, and that was the beginning of. And so I think at that point that her Aunt Grace made that suggestion, it created for us a crossroad. And that was our first major decision. At that time, we didn't look at it as that, well, this is just do this or do that. But now we look back on it, and I see that as a very definite crossroads in our life.
It was.
And then, secondly, was another crossroads was when we was in Rupert, and we had made the decision after praying that the Lord wanted us to plant a work. I look back now and I don't remember, and I can't put together just why we were making decisions we were, but at any rate, we felt impressed to plant a new church. We built a new branch church out on the north side there in Rupert, but we just had in our heart to plant a new church. And for some reason, I got in my mind that Mountain Home needed a church.
Dear Lord, why?
Why I thought that, I couldn't tell you. But at any rate, that's what we felt was. So we resigned Rupert, and we rented a little apartment for Rube and the kids to stay in. I went to Alaska to hold some meetings. And when I came back, then we was going to move to Mountain Home. We made a trip to Mountain Home. We wanted a place just on the edge of town. I wanted our kids kind of out of the city. And we wanted a house big enough to start services in our living room. And we got down there, and just like that, immediately we found just the ideal place. On the edge of town, it was 2 acres, nice big living room. It was just, well, this is a God thing. And so we signed the deal, put down earnest money, and really excited. Went back to Rupert thinking the Lord's just really putting it all together. We got a call about a half hour or an hour after we got home, and it was a realtor said, "I'm very sorry," but he said that listing was one that allowed the owner to sell on his own, and said he signed papers 1 hour before I signed the papers with you. And he said, "I'm sorry," but he said, "I've got to honor that. So if you'll come back down, I'll find you something else." Well, that was kind of devastating to us. So we got in the car on that next Monday then, went to Mountain Home. I mean, we scoured that place. We looked for anything that would be suitable. There was nothing. So we finally decided, well, we've got to have some place. So we found this big old house in the middle of Mountain Home. I didn't like the house. I didn't like the location. Didn't like anything about it, but it felt like we had to do something. So it was for rent, and we were just going to rent it. So it said, go to the motel. You can get the keys if you want to look at the house. And we went to this motel, and so I said, "I want to look at this house." And she said, "Oh, yeah, it's right here. It's keys on a red tag." And she turned around to get it, and she looked around and started mumbling to herself, and she looked in a drawer, and then she went in the back room and looked around, and she's talking to herself, and she got really frustrated. And in the middle of that, something hit me and said, "You better think this through." Something just like it was a check point, kind of blocking things, and it dawned on me, I said, we better go and think this over, get out the car. I said, "I think we need to go home and pray more." Well, we went home, we'd resigned. The new pastor was there. I didn't really want to go back to the service that day, but we thought, when Sunday you go to church. So we went to church, and after service we was going out, and a man in the church, Dan Satterwhite, came up to me. He said, "Have you ever given consideration to Pendleton?" And I said, "No, that's one of the last places I'd want to live." The only thing I knew about it was basically kind of an Indian town, and they had the roundup there, which was an exciting thing, but that was probably the last place I wanted to live. And he just looked me straight in the eyes. He said, "I think you ought to give it some consideration." And that's all he said. So I went home, we talked about it. So I decided, I'd had a friend told me that he went to a town one time to see about starting a church, and he said he just walked the streets to get the feel. So I thought, well, I'll give that a try. So I got on the train. There's a hotel right beside the railroad tracks there in Pendleton. And so I got a room, got off the train. It was evening, just turning dusk. It was still daylight. But came down out of the hotel room, stepped on the street, and I kid you not, I hadn't gone 50 feet, and a man approached me. And he said, "Well, hello there." He said, "I don't think I've met you. Are you new here?" And I said, "Well, yes, I really am. I just came in on the train." He said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And I thought, well, just will be honest. I said, "Well, I'm considering maybe moving here and planting a new church." He said, "Well, praise the Lord, brother. We need a good church here." And I never met him. Just 50 feet, I hadn't walked on the sidewalk. He said, "My car's right up here." He was the county surveyor. I got in the car. He said, "Let me drive you around." So he drove out of Pendleton, went over the hill, over into Mackay Creek, they call it. And I'd never seen that part. It's a beautiful valley up there. And he drove up the valley about 2 miles, made a turn, made another jog, came to a bridge, crossed Mackay Creek. And he said, "Well, this is as far as we need to go," and it was starting to get kind of dusk. But he said, "This is kind of a nice area. Thought you'd want to see it." And so he said, "I'll get you back to the hotel." Took me back, and it gave me a different feeling, seeing that other part of Pendleton that we'd never seen driving through town. And so I went back to the hotel and went back home and told Rube. We got in the car, drove to Pendleton, and got a hold of a realtor. She took us in her car, drove exactly the same route he did, made the same 2 turns, came to this bridge, and she said, "Well, here's the property I want to show you." And it was it just like hit me with such an impact that the night, just the few nights before, he'd taken me to that same bridge and stopped there. And then we get in the realtor's car and goes to that same bridge, and here's the corner of the property that he wanted to show us. And that was the house that we ended up buying. That was our first house that we ever bought or owned ourselves. And the kids will, I think, attest to the fact that that was a tremendous place to live and have their younger years, teenage years, and kids' years there at Pendleton. And that to me was a crossroads, that the Lord didn't let that lady find that red tagged key. If she would have, we likely would have rented that, and we would have had our history run through Mountain Home, which could have been a whole different story for our family. And
We drive through Mountain Home now, and it's like, what were we thinking? It's just like, no, thank you, Lord. We always have a thankful heart when we didn't move there.
There's another one that goes back a little bit earlier to our getting together. I had ROTC training in high school, had 2 years. Got an award for high marksman and done real well at it. I was given an offer to join through the ROTC program. I would have been to basic, right after basic, gone into officer's training. In 20 years, I would have retired, And so I had a plan that I thought really sounded neat. Man, I won't even be 40. I'll be retired. I can still do what I want to, another career, do whatever. That's pretty cool, pretty neat. And so that was the direction I was going. And I got a phone call from Jim Christensen and Gene Dillon. And they said, Norman, they were friends of mine, said, we're going to go to Tulsa to Bible school. Why don't you go with us? And it didn't strike me at first. And then they kind of kept talking and trying to persuade me. So I gave it some thought. And I thought, well, that might be kind of a smart thing before I get into the military thing. Go to school for a Bible year. It'd be good for me to get my feet kind of anchored and be a good experience. So I made a decision. Of course, my mom was pleased and happy with that. So as a result, they came by and we drove together to Tulsa, and that was the beginning of my first year in Bible school. At the end of that year, I had absolute confidence and assurance of my calling, and that was to pastor that 1 year. And I thought about that crossroads in my life. Had it not been for that phone call, that one singular phone call, my life would have taken a different direction. I would have had a military career. I'd have never met this pretty lady. My whole life would have been a different scenario. But one phone call interrupted that. And I learned a lot from that, and I think my kids have probably experienced it some too. There's a lot of decisions that we make, sometimes on a daily basis, choices, a good decision, right decision, and it has an effect upon our life. But there comes major crossroads in our life that we need to be very sensitive and very attentive to, that the Lord just kind of puts a sign up there and gives us a sense of direction, and we should be careful that we don't miss them. I've thought many times, which is not an exercise in any probability, but what would it have been if I wouldn't have taken note of that? What if I'd ignored that phone call? No, I've got my plans together, and I'd have gone another direction. What if I'd have went ahead and forced myself to go to Mountain Home? It would have been a whole different story. Our life would have had a different history. And then I was going to mention the deal of Bible school. At the end of that year, I knew. So I went 2 years at Tulsa. In the last year, I was going to go back. And they were beginning the Conquerors Bible College in Portland. The plans were, but they hadn't signed the papers on the property. I was working at the cannery, and I had a deadline that I had to make to go back to Tulsa. I called Ernest Moyer, who was the leader at that point and was going to be the first president at the opening. And so I told him, I said, what's the story? I said, I got to make a decision the next day or two at the most. He says, hold on, Norman. He said, I'm hoping we're going to get it together. I kid you not, he called me, I think that second day. He said, Norman, he said, I prayed through. That was the term he used. I prayed through. We're going to get it. Count on it. We're going to get it. And so I made my choice on that decision that I was going to wait until, and within the next couple of days, they made the decision. And so I, instead of going back to Tulsa, went to Portland, Conquerors Bible College, and it was there that I met her. And that one phone call and that one decision made all the difference in the world. I probably would have never met her if I'd have gone back there. Somebody would have got her before I did.
Well,
and
you were already in a relationship too yourself.
So, you know, my kids maybe wouldn't be here. So I'd like to pass on to my own kids, be very cognizant of major crossroads. Mm-hmm. Some decisions affect our lives, plus or minus, but there's other crossroads that actually determine our destinies and our direction, and be sensitive to those and be aware and be alert to them.
What's important to me is that you can love people where they're at, where they're coming from. I have had some very unique experiences with people. I don't know exactly, and I'm not trying to elevate myself, but people feel pretty much at home around me because I accept people kind of where they're at. I have that, it's almost a gift. I love people. The people I don't even know have asked me, like I was walking down in the store one day, and there's this older, and I was younger, and this older lady says, "You look like a person that would tie my shoe for me, would you?" And her shoe had come untied. Just little things like that. And I have so many, I'm telling you, time and time again, people that felt comfortable with me. It was kind of a surprise, And I think when you accept people in their humanity and where they're at, I just love people, just do. And my expectations aren't. I'm not bragging. This is just a gift from the Lord, probably, as well. I don't love. The people I don't love are people that are pretenders, or gossipers, or people that aren't real, and they want to make you think there's something that's not who they are.
Well, probably I feel one of the themes that has motivated me is making a difference. Making a difference in people's lives, the circumstances, in situations, in locations. I think basically that would be my theme, is making a difference wherever I'm at and with whatever I'm working. I want to have made a difference in the situation status.
First of all, I want them to find somebody that loves the Lord like they do, that have the same value, spiritual value that they have. And marry people that, everybody has flaws, but don't marry a fixer-upper necessarily. When you have to help somebody along too much, that can get really, really old. Maybe that sounds a little bit like partial or whatever. That would be my suggestion. Somebody that carries values like you do about truth. I can stand anything if it's truth. I can handle that. But if it's underhanded or not truth, I'll always kind of suspect that person. So get somebody that you know when truth is being spoken, and you can handle truth. I mean, truth is very, very big deal with me.
Well, as they seek out a companion, my concept to a great extent, I think, is that God has ordained and planned and designed that the husband be the head of the home. And so from that perspective, his calling and his vision is really vitally important. So for my granddaughters, I trust that they will look at the motivation and the direction, the character, the inclinations of a man that she could invest her life in and put her confidence and trust in, and not approach it from, well, when we get married, I can change him or I can make it different for him, because to a great extent, it's God's design that the man be the leader of the home. So his career should really, to a certain extent, be the marker for the pathway that they follow. It's not that they won't have an influence, or have their own life and talent, but they need to feel that they will be comfortable under the leadership and guidership of that man's life, that they'll feel confident and trustful for that. Not enter into it like, well, I'll change him and make him what I want to be after he's married.
That's dangerous.
Look for a man that you feel confident and trustful and you could depend on, and that he's got the right direction. And for my grandsons, I'd like for them to understand that God loves the wife, and he has likened his bride to the wife. And so the wife is very precious to God, and it's his responsibility to care for that wife and to love that wife as Christ loved the church. And so he needs to be sure that he's choosing a companion that he can invest that kind of commitment to, and that her temperament and that her personality and her spirit will be compatible to the point that he can confidently be the leader without having to contend with a divided home. And I definitely strongly believe that God has partners prepared for us. Not that God makes the choice, but I think if they're open and willing to follow the Lord and ask for the Lord's direction, and their desires to please God, God will give them the desire of their heart, whether it's our granddaughters or our grandsons. But the choice of their companion is a vital, vital decision and choice to make.
And I think in this generation especially, things have changed from a lot from when we were, and the women are employed, most of them have careers. You've got to give them room to have their life too. Not in a women's lib type way, but their value is realized more than just in the kitchen or just taking care of the kids. Maybe they might be a wonderful teacher or even pastor or whatever. I think we got to give people room to be the best of what they are and what they can do. I think that's real important. That was a little bit of a generation thing with our generation. The women, again, without getting redundant, the pastor's wife, when I was first being pastor's wife, we had our expectations were to be always connected with the church. Something was connected with the church, but not so as much now. And it's just, sometimes you have a career and a path that's different from your husband's, and that's okay too.
Yeah, great, really great.
In her case, I've told others this, a man may feel called and have a calling from the Lord, and the wife that he would choose or look for may not have that calling and may not have that same sense of God's direction for them. So when they marry a man that has a calling, they've got to be prepared to share that calling. And they're not responsible necessarily for the calling, but it's important that they feel like they can share life's challenge and direction and callings, and finding a partner that you share that with is very important and valuable.
I think it's so important for you, all of you, to follow the Word of God on tithing. I think 10% belongs to the Lord. And when you do that, I mean, that 90% just multiplies. It's all I can tell you. We have not ever had a big income in our whole entire life. I mean, not even close to what most of you will understand or have. Pastoring is not a lucrative job unless you're in the big league, and that's not where we were coming from. But I like to tithe, and I love to give to other people. I like to do things, people that unexpected for them as well. But I think 10% belongs to the Lord. When you give him that, then his word and his promise is that he's going to take care of the other part. And I'm telling you, it works. We have got so many blessings. I mean, blessings because he's gifted. For one thing, this man's gifted and could bless us with a beautiful home. And just because of the giving back to the Lord, and it was easy. And I love to give to other people. And I don't even want them to know about it. I just want to do something for them. And I think if you keep that up and not try to just pull it all in and buy for me, that's going to drown you. It's just going to be too much for you. You're just, it's just like eating too much candy or whatever. But when you give and give to people and give to the Lord, keep your commitment to him. And I think that is the key for financial blessing. That is the key. It's just that simple.
She's the most generous person that I think I know of in the world. And that's finances as well as her love and care for people. We've never made enough money to hardly even think about investing. But I think we did use wisdom in watching our indebtedness. We always tried to keep ourselves free of debt other than absolute necessities. We always drove a reliable car. We didn't drive expensive cars, but we drove good cars that we didn't have to be ashamed of. I drove some pretty hot rigs, and I've driven some pretty tin can stuff too. I had a Datsun pickup that everybody teased me about, the pickup of many colors, and I bought it as a wreck and got parts to put it back together, and had a blue door, and it was basically red, and I think had a green fender, and I don't know what it was, it looked like a calico pickup. And but at any rate, we watched our finances and lived very frugally. I think our wisest investment when we did finally buy a home in Pendleton was we started building up a little equity. And the house we have now, we built with, actually it was a gift of God that gave us the location to start with.
Beautiful location.
And then built it's a very nice house, home that we love, beautiful view. And that's been our wisest investment. The value of that home now will be what we're able to pass on to our children. But we don't have stocks or bonds, or investment never was part of our program, and basically
retirement was. The church gave us a really good retirement investment.
That we need to be cognizant of it and mention. The church was very gracious. And in fact, what they did is they took a mortgage on the church to provide us an income for retirement until we was 90. And so we're grateful and very thankful that happened. That gave us enough income to live on. And if everything goes okay and all right, well, we'll have a little bit to pass on to our kids from the value of our home. And we'd encourage them to do the same thing, which most all of them are. The Lord's blessed them. Look at this beautiful house. And God's been good to them, and they've been wise with their finances. And so my encouragement, their major investment, would be a home that when they get older, it'll be paid for, and it'll be a safe place for them to live without worries and concern.